All right, folks, welcome to Nino's Corner.tv. I'm with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and he just wants me to call him Douglas from here on out. So I'm going to just call him Douglas. Douglas, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love to get your perspective. I've seen you all over the internet. You're making a huge splash everywhere, especially with the times we're living in now. I mean, we're on the border of chaos, it seems like, in the world, and tensions are high. Douglas, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, happy to be with you, Nino. Heard lots about you.
Good or bad?
What difference does it make?
It doesn't. It's probably mostly bad, but I'll go with it. All right, man. So today, Trump has declared Antifa a terrorist organization. I mean, I know we all saw that coming, but I'm watching these accounts get pulled from TikTok. I'm watching a lot of these almost like mental illness just spread across the internet, celebrating a death of someone that I believe was a patriot and a good man. He spread the Christian belief and nuclear family values, and a lot of people are just using their freedom of speech, right? But at the same time, they're being punished for it, kind of like we were in 2020 to 2024. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is like a double-edged sword, or the pot calling the kettle black. What's your thoughts on this, and what's your thoughts on Trump labeling Antifa a terrorist organization?
Well, let's take Charlie Kirk first. Charlie was killed not for anything he said, but because people were listening to him. That's the problem. It suddenly became clear that he commanded the attention of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of young men and women, somewheres between the age of 18 and 30. And as a result, he was judged to be dangerous because he could actually move things along. Now, let's be frank. I saw him a few years ago, and I'm trying to remember what the issue was, but he was someone who had his pulse on the population, the younger generation, and he listened, which is something a lot of people don't do. And so he changed his positions, and the most recent change, of course, was on Israel and what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. He also changed his view on Epstein and the importance of bringing that to light. And this sort of thing began to spread very, very quickly. You had lots of people listening and saying, yeah, this is outrageous. You don't kill people at will, men, women, and kids, and drive them out of their homes where they've lived for 1,000 years or more. That's just not right. And he finally said, no, it isn't right. And he began telling other people it wasn't right. And the rest is history. Somebody decided to kill him. Now,
Right.
we could sit here for the next 30 minutes and speculate on who the somebody was. But we do know, for instance, that there were at least three unmanned aerial vehicles, that is, drones overhead, which is a little odd for a Turning Point USA rally of what, 3,000 people. NSA reported, I'm told, that there were lots of Israeli cell phones in the audience.
Wow.
That's unusual. I mean, I don't have an answer and I don't know, but I am very skeptical of what the FBI says.
Me
And
too.
that's not a new revelation. I've been very skeptical of them for some time. And if they call you up, I've been through this. I was called and they asked me, "Will you tell us a little bit about your views on Russia and your sources?" And I said, "Well, let me give you the telephone number of my attorney. Call him, he'll set it up, and we'll meet with you." "No, no, 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 no. We don't want to meet with him. We just want to talk to you. This is a relaxed conversation. You're
Yeah.
not in trouble." I said, "Well, that's great. Well, then call my attorney and set up the meeting." "Well, no, thanks. Forget it." Click. It was off.
Wow.
I mean, my point is that I'm at the stage now where I don't really trust that agency, and that's hard for me. I
Even with Cash Patel and Dan
yeah,
Bongino, I mean, they're the ones that came out and said, "Oh, there is no Epstein list. Epstein did, he
yeah.
did self-delete," and it's just like everyone knows that to be false. Everyone
Well, first, let's keep in mind, you change maybe two, three, or four people at the top of any large organization. It's not going to make a lot of difference. If you're really going to change an organization, it has to be huge turnover at multiple levels.
knows.
That hasn't happened. So, bottom line is it's not something I'm comfortable with. And I feel badly because I grew up in a household where everybody worshiped at the altar of the FBI
Right.
as the defender of everything good in the United States. I mean, it never even occurred to me it would be any different. So I think we're all skeptical now. We should be. And I don't know that we'll ever find out what the dickens really happened. I mean, I'm not sure we know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Even with JFK, I mean, 50 years later, they come out with some information. I still don't trust it.
Yeah. But if I wake up dead somewhere and they say, well, Macgregor shot himself, let me tell you right here and now, that's not going to happen. I'm not shooting myself.
Well, thank you for making that clear. But I mean, if you really think about it, Charlie Kirk was capturing the minds and souls of the young generation, spreading the word of Christianity, the nuclear family, and that is a big no-no. That's a big threat, right? That's a big threat to the liberal left or globalist agenda, correct?
I think so. And when we talk about these globalists, we have to understand this is not something that popped up last week. This is a movement that began in the 1960s, 1965 onward. They
Would you say it
finally,
started with Project Paperclip when we brought over the German scientists, and that's when
uh,
it was birthed here, or was it?
no, I think paperclip was an act of national security. You know, we desperately wanted them because
Yeah.
without them, you wouldn't have had NASA. You wouldn't have had intercontinental ballistic missiles. Forget it. The U.S. was woefully behind technologically, way behind the Germans. No, we were interested in their jet powered aircraft. It took us another 20 years to produce anything close to what they had. So no, I think that was something that made sense. And you know, when your national survival is at stake, remember the Soviets were just as interested in capturing all of this technology as we were. And when the war ended, we were lucky because Werner von Braun had contacted us. That's what people
Interesting.
don't understand. Or
I
or
thought
he
I thought the technology really had that turning point, no pun intended, but that turning point when the Roswell crash happened. I believe that's when I mean, really, let's think, don't you think so? I mean, that's when everything kind of really shifted and technology just boom right
well, you
after the
know,
Roswell crash.
well, somebody, so there are people out there who insist that there was such a crash in the Black Forest in Germany in the
Okay.
1930s.
Okay.
And there are
So
at
that's
least,
why Germany got the technology first.
well, that, you know, there's two people that insist that that's true. And they also insist that when questioned privately, they said, well, Werner von Braun, how did you get so far so fast? And he said, well, we had help. And they said, help from whom? And he pointed up. Now, that's something I can't prove, but supposedly that was said. These are things beyond our ability to confirm, but what we can say when you talk about something like Operation Paperclip, we needed him and we needed about 300 of the technicians that he brought with him. They made all the difference in the world to our national security over the next 25, 30, 40 years.
Right. You know, like if when you look at the technology today, man, and I'm just watching these. I thought we would have drive flying cars before we've had driverless cars. I mean, I thought that was a more of an impossible feat. But I mean, cell phones, the whole thing, social media. I mean, we're going into the generation now is going into generation AI. I don't even know what to expect with what's coming down the pipeline now. I mean, this is just going to get so insane. Um,
Well, people don't understand that technology develops on a very uneven basis. You'll have a great leap forward in one area, and the other areas will stagnate for many, many years. Back in the 1930s, and then as recently as 2010, I think it was this Michio Kaku, this
yeah.
Japanese scientist who predicted that by 2020 we would all have laser pistols and laser cannon and everything else. Well, we're still a long way from that sort of thing. We still are dealing with laws of physics that we have been unable to break. You
Right.
have something called fractal mathematics that is an integral part of that. We haven't been able to break the code on a lot of these things. Now, that doesn't mean we won't at some point, but that's why some areas are rapid development, other areas not so much.
Let's shift gears just for a second. Let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about NATO. We know that, you know, on my channel, we talk about this all the time, the globalists, plotting to create a world war scenario, World War III.
Yeah.
What do you make of the situation right now developing with Russia and NATO and Trump's meeting with Putin in Alaska? I mean, he gave the role. I mean, he literally gave Putin the red carpet treatment and kind of shafted Zelensky. That says a lot to me. But what do you make of all this?
Well, I'm not sure that President Trump did exactly what you said. I think he wanted a photo op badly. Trump's very
Okay.
big on optics.
Okay.
Remember, he had a lot of experience with professional wrestling, so I'm sure he understands what that means very well.
True.
And he's a reality TV star. And remember, it was not the Russians who asked for the meeting with us. He sent Witkoff to Moscow and said, I want a meeting. And I think initially the Russians were a little surprised because they expected a meeting that would involve a discussion of proposals. People would have studied these things in advance. Each side would come in with its views and there would be a discussion. None of that occurred. When President Trump and his team showed up, they didn't show up with any proposals at all. President Trump said, I want a ceasefire. And once again, they explained why that wasn't possible. That was not the path. You know, a lot of people don't understand when World War I ended with a ceasefire, there were weeks before that that there were negotiations. In other words, when things ended on the 11th, it was because there were negotiations leading up to it. They agreed something, and then there was a ceasefire. And the Russian point is that's what has to happen now. We've never recognized their legitimate national security interests. And you can't do business that way. You can't walk in and say, you don't have any, we're in charge. You know, we're no longer the sole superpower. In fact, we're not, we're a shadow of our former selves 30 years ago in military terms, and I would argue economic terms right now. But people don't understand that. But President Trump did get a great photo op. It looked great, and he got to stand around near our newest combat aircraft and look overhead as a B-2 bomber flew by and feel very powerful. But it all amounted to absolutely nothing, and
So,
it changed nothing.
so what about the threatening to withdraw from NATO? Don't you think that's the thing he should do over the oil and gas situation? Shouldn't, don't you think that's like a move he should make to withdraw from NATO? I mean, we are their military arm.
Yeah, well, I think NATO probably should have been disbanded in the mid 1990s. There was no real reason for it. And we ended up doing a lot of things, intervening in the Balkans, first in Bosnia, then subsequently in Kosovo and Serbia, in a search for things to give NATO to do.
Right.
They had this senator, I don't know if it was Senator Nunn or I think it was him. One of the senators said if NATO is not out of area, in other words, outside of Europe doing something, then it's probably out of business. You know, at the time I was a major in the Army and a lieutenant colonel. Those were those years for me, the 90s. And then I was a full colonel by the time the 90s ended. But in all of that time, I spent a lot of it in Europe, a lot of it in Germany, a lot of it in the Balkans. And I and most of my peers concluded we should leave and go home. There's no one to fight. The Russians pose no threat. Russia had become a Russian Orthodox Christian country again.
Right.
It was no longer communist. It did not subscribe to an ideology of expansion. It wasn't leading any revolutions. It was trying to recover from 70 years of communism. And our view was, well, let's get along with the Russians. And in fact, I had meetings with Russian officers and soldiers. They were very professional. What we did together worked very, very well. Now, I'm talking about primarily in the Balkans. I was there in November of 2001, and several of the Russian senior officers, I was with several general officers who were on the Russian general staff, and they said to me, you know, we've read your books. What do you think the real problem was during the Cold War? And I said, well, supposedly it was communism. And they all laughed because they said, well, you know, communism didn't work. Yeah, we got
Yeah.
the message. But they said they concluded, well, there were people in both countries at the top that had an interest in the hostility and the conflict. There were ways to profit from it. And I said, no, I think that's not an unreasonable assumption. But my point is, everything that I've seen since the collapse of the Soviet state and the Soviet state system told me that there was no enemy. And there was every reason for us to do business. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, Ukraine's never been a nation state. This is brand new.
Right.
And it was cobbled together very rapidly at the end by the communists. They drew boundaries that made no sense historically, culturally, ethnically, or anything else. And the most important mission that we could see when I was at Supreme Headquarters of Allied Powers Europe for Ukraine was to be neutral and to put hundreds and hundreds of miles between NATO and Russian military power. In other words, if it's neutral, it works both ways. It's advantageous to them and it's advantageous to us. But we didn't see this vast expansion coming. We saw evidence for it in the Balkans against Serbia, but we didn't connect all the dots at the time. And unfortunately, when this coup was launched by Victoria Nuland and her friends in 2014 in Kiev, we ended up installing a government that was radical and violently anti-Russian. So it was only a matter of time until a war broke out, which was stupid and unnecessary. And Trump said that. And by the way, he was correct. Now he's starting to talk like Biden,
Right.
which makes no sense at all
And
because
and and every
we,
time he comes close to like a peace deal, or I want to get your thoughts on this too, because this to me raises a lot of red flags. Uh, do you think these, like the Nord Stream pipeline, right, that got blown up, and we know they blamed Russia, and then a U.S. factory gets blown up in Ukraine, they blame Russia. Every time Trump comes with a peace deal, Russia bombs Ukraine. Is that a false flag? Is that NATO committing these acts and blaming Russia?
well, first of all, I'm completely unconvinced that the Russians did anything to harm Nord Stream 2, or
Right, right.
it doesn't make any sense at all. I suspect that 𝗫_𝗏 is probably right in the article that he wrote. I commend that to people. When I was working at the end of the Trump administration, there were already people in the White House lobbying Donald Trump to do everything he could to stop the Nord Stream 2 from operating and trying to break up this what everybody said was dangerous dependency by Germany on Russian oil and gas. Nobody understood the past. I mean, in 1914, the number one trading partner for Germany was Russia, and the number one trading partner for Russia was Germany. In 1941, just before the Germans launched their invasion, the same thing. Each country was the other's number one trading partner. This has been going on for 300 years. If anything, the two world wars were exceptions. For the balance of the 300 years, they got along very well and did a land office business. It posed no threat to us at all. But people convinced Donald Trump of that. And obviously, that was the keystone in the edifice of the argument that Biden made. It was all nonsense. The Russians want to do business with the West. They need the West business. Now we have so alienated them and so damaged the relationship that they've turned to China. And
Right.
what we don't understand is that China today is where we were in 1945. In other words, we were in the takeoff stage. If you look at the
But I
biggest,
thought China's economy was in shambles right now.
no, not at all. It's
No,
all
huh?
no. The Chinese are have the largest manufacturing base in the world. They're desperately in need of oil and gas
But hold on, isn't the point of these tariffs to bring back the manufacturing companies and jobs here in America? So I mean, it's going to suck for a while, but I mean, at some point, like in 6 months into a year, they'll start coming back and building here, correct?
I wouldn't hold my breath. And the reason is very simple. When we lost things, in other words, when we shipped our manufacturing base overseas, and this is the CEO class, okay? The so-called shareholder class, these are all the rich people. And people on the Hill got rich as a result of supporting this. We shipped things overseas, primarily to China. The Chinese did not come to us and ask for anything. They didn't come to us to try to buy anything. We shipped things to China. We betrayed the interests of American workers. We dismantled our own manufacturing base. Now, here we are. Trump says, I want to bring it back. Well, that's great. So, how do you do that? Do you do that by threatening, which is what he's really doing with his tariffs, 100% tariff or 50% tariff against India or China? Is that going to do any good? No, because they have developed to the point now where they don't have to depend on us.
Right. Yeah.
That's the
Just go
problem.
around us.
Yeah, that's the problem now. The supply chains are shifting away from us and shifting to China and to India because supply chains in business to be successful need stability and predictability.
But the number
We
one consumer
demonstrated the
is
opposite.
the number one consumer. What Trump's trying to play with leverage is the biggest consumer of all these products is America, right? So he's trying to bring the manufacturing jobs back to America so we buy from our USA made, right?
Yeah, But where's the incentive to build that? How do you bring not only foreign investment, but our people here in the United States that have capital? How do you incentivize investing it here? There-
Aren't they? I mean, he's bringing in a lot of people to bring 600 million. Mark Zuckerberg,
uh,
AI plant Palantir. I mean, no, I'm just asking. I'm just
well,
honest question.
Palantir doesn't employ very many Americans.
But the
Remember,
future of AI, the future of AI is I mean, the base is going to be here in America, correct? And Amazon, the whole thing,
if
technological.
you look at the AI package that we were peddling on the internet and promoting, the Chinese suddenly developed another AI package for which they charged nothing and put it out there to the whole world, and it's much better than anything we offer.
So let me ask you this. What about Taiwan right now? I mean, they're in the balance right now. They're on edge. They're flying jets over them. There's battleships out there. What's going to happen with Taiwan? Does China make a move on Taiwan through with all this going on, or will they wait till Trump's out of office and then make a move on Taiwan?
Well, first of all, I don't think China is ever going to invade Taiwan. Let
Okay.
me tell you why. You have two major political parties on Taiwan, and I won't bother trying to pronounce their names, okay, because I'm not a master of Chinese, obviously, and I don't want to offend anybody. But one is the old party of Chiang Kai-shek. These are the people that retreated to the island when they lost the war on the mainland. That party is very pro unification with China.
Mm,
They control the parliament right now.
okay.
The other party is a pro-Japanese, pro-American party. And the president is currently from that party, but he doesn't control the parliament. As long as we do not put rockets and missiles on Taiwan that can reach the Chinese mainland, the Chinese don't particularly care what happens on Taiwan because the Taiwanese banks are as heavily invested in China as China is invested in them. In other words, if you had a crisis tomorrow morning, somebody thought they were going to go to war, the banks on Taiwan would shift all of their assets to China to ride out the war. Now, think about that. Does that sound like an imminent invasion? Now, what everybody talks about, what Donald Trump was talking about, is the microcircuitry they produce, which is the most sophisticated and the best in the world. Everybody currently needs it. Japan needs it, Korea needs it, China needs it, and we need it. They're selling to everybody. Nobody wants to destroy that under any circumstances. In
Why
fact,
can't we just bring them here and give them an
well,
incentive to come here to the?
Donald Trump tried to do that. And at the end of his first term, he had closed what he thought was a deal with the owner of the manufacturing base in Taiwan. But as soon as he was out of office, it fell apart. But it fell apart for a reason, because the owner said, "You've got a problem." And they wanted to go to Arizona, as I recollect. You don't have the human capital to man the manufacturing.
So bring them.
Ah, well, now you're talking about bringing in Chinese to do the labor.
If they're just doing the
But
labor, I mean,
yeah, but it's not just labor. You're talking about very sophisticated, precise work. We need Americans to do that. The Chinese already have lots of people who can do that. We need Americans to be employed in those places and do that work. That's what Donald Trump wanted. And I agree with him 100%.
yeah, but to
Strong.
get it started and then have Americans come in and train under them.
Ah, that's different. There was some talk about Chinese management initially, just as we've had German management in factories in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, where we produce automobiles, for instance. We do some of that down in Mexico, where the top management is American or it's European or whatever initially. But the problem is, it's more complex than that. Our educational system has failed us.
Oh, of
We
course.
are not, yeah, but this is not something that you learn on the fly. We need people who are technically competent, who are not necessarily going to four-year colleges and studying archaeology or
Right.
basket weaving in the year
But
four.
that's why I'm saying bring them in and have them train us. Have them train us under them, train Americans under them. And
Well,
that's what we'd have to do if you really think about it. That's the only way.
well, the Chinese owner wasn't terribly excited about that because he met the people that he was going to work with and didn't think they had what it took to be successful. Now, all I'm trying to say is that it's sort of like you in boxing. You know, when did you start training to be a boxer? How old were you?
5 years old.
Well, okay, five. I didn't meet you when you were 5 or 6. It could have been
Yeah.
dangerous. Anyway, But the point is, you start years in advance
Right.
and you take years of training and conditioning so that things become automatic that otherwise have to be learned.
Right.
That's the problem for us here in the United States. It's a problem in our military establishment as well. It takes 10 years to build a combat formation from the ground up. That's to be any good, that's what it takes.
And I agree with you. And that's why the globalists who've intercepted or infiltrated America have taken decades to socially engineer Americans, and our school systems are indoctrination camps, you can call them,
Yeah,
churches even, to create this army of misfits they have now, which we
that's
call,
right.
the fatherless. They took the father out of the home. They
Yep.
they implemented all this it's not like you said, 1960s, Summer of Love, and all this stuff. And that's how they engineered and socially engineered culture to where
But
we're at right
you
now.
know, you
So we
should
have to
listen.
start somewhere, right,
Yeah,
Douglas?
well, we do. We do. We absolutely have to start somewhere, and that's the problem. Where do we start? How do we start?
We just start.
For
We
instance,
just start.
no, 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 no. For instance, no, no, no. There has to be a strategy. We have no strategy. The Japanese, the Chinese, until recently, the Germans. If I took you to Switzerland, you'd see the same thing. There's a national scientific industrial strategy. People are sit down and plan out for the next 10 years what has to be taught, how it's going to be taught, where the students are, how you're getting them into the classroom, what do they need to leave with. And by the way, the corporations need to be brought in, and they are, for instance, in Germany and Japan, to identify students that they can hire when they graduate and put to work.
I agree
These
that
things take time.
no, and I agree with you. But the only reason I say we should start now is because I know this takes time. But why don't we bring the people in from Taiwan, give them start schooling our kids. Start there, give them amnesty. They're scared to death of China anyway. Bring them here, give them amnesty. I'm serious. I mean, and let them be American.
You don't have to give the Chinese from Taiwan amnesty for God's sakes. That's not required. They're not an enemy. I don't think that China is. I just think China has bad habits for reasons of history and culture that we need to come to terms with. I mean,
Okay,
everywhere we could spend time talking about that, but listen, in theory, you're right. But I'm simply saying there has to be a larger strategy because the government has to reinforce and support these activities in a way that makes sense. And let me give you another quick example. You've heard about rare earths. Everybody talks about rare earths. You can go look them up on the periodic table. They're down near the bottom.
yeah,
They are out there, but they are in great quantities in certain places on the globe. We have been dependent upon these coming out of China and Mongolia for decades. We have rare earths here. There are rare earths in abundance in Canada. Now, here's the rest of the
Alaska.
yeah, but here's the rest of the story. You have to have a refinery that converts tons and tons of material into perhaps 10 or 15-pound bags of rare earths. Okay. Where are the refineries? China has a refinery. Kazakhstan has a refinery. Do we have a refinery? No.
No.
So we're shipping everything to China or Kazakhstan to be refined. And then everybody complains about our dependence and our national security. Well, what the hell have we been doing? Who is sitting up in Washington and looking at the strategic picture and figuring out that we need to be as independent as possible in the area of rare earths? We need to gather them from other sources. Right now, Norway has one of the largest caches in the world, probably the largest single concentration of rare earths in Europe. The Norwegians and we are very close and good friends.
And
So,
Congo, correct? And Africa.
oh, of course, of course. So if we build a refinery, we can bring their rare earths here, refine it. We can ship rare earths back to them in a
Did
refined state, but we can also keep what's here. We pay for it. In other words, we haven't thought through this thing at all. You know, your coal seams in the Appalachians right now, and the seams are rare earths, huge quantities. Nobody ever thought about that. They think coal is only about coal. No, it isn't. You can mine coal. We have very good, high quality coal, by the way, desperately needed in China, desperately needed in India and other places. We could be shipping that out in great quantities, but at the same time, what comes out of the seams can be used for rare earth harvesting. There is so much that we as a nation need to do. It needs orchestration and direction from Washington in order for it to happen. Because if I took you to places in Kentucky or Ohio or Indiana and said, well, we could do X, Y, and Z, the first question says, well, where do we get the money? We need
Right.
capital. But instead of investing it that way, we've got $1 trillion defense budget. We have trillions of dollars disappearing into the black hole of uh, monetary redistribution called the welfare state. We've done nothing to deal with all of the corruption and scandalous behavior in Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, you had Elon Musk, who went in there. He had the right idea. He discovered that we had millions of people drawing cash out of Medicare and Medicaid that half of them didn't even exist. We've got so much nonsense going on. We need to focus here at home.
That's
We're
my
not
next
doing that.
That's my next question. There's so many conflicts that America is involved in across the planet right now. You got Ukraine, Middle East, Congo, China, and here domestically, right?
Well,
Um,
you've also got this cockamamie idea to take on Venezuela.
right. So, well, hold on. But isn't there rumors or allegedly China's there with their missile systems in Venezuela? Aren't they in our backyard and in Cuba? I mean,
Well,
they're scared of us in Taiwan, but aren't they already in our backyard?
no, the Chinese are making investments, but they're not necessarily military. Now, could they become that way? Well, if I were sitting in Venezuela right now on potentially the largest oil and gas reserves in the world, even though they're very deep, they're not easily attained. And that's something we do better than anybody else in terms of deep drilling. We have the best technology, the best technicians in the world. We could go down to Venezuela. We could restore that very, very quickly. We could improve the lives of the people in Venezuela, but we'd have to do business with Maduro. In other words, we'd have to accept the fact that he's in charge and work with him.
But
And
don't you think it's important to overthrow him? I mean, he's accepting money
no,
from the Chinese. Well, I mean,
no,
the drugs that come through Venezuela to Mexico
no,
to
no,
America.
no. All of the few drugs that come out of Venezuela come out of Colombia. They go through Venezuela, and the generals of the Venezuelan army are skimming off the top of that trade to make themselves rich. But the stream of drugs that come out of there is minuscule.
So what's the strategy then? Why are we going after Venezuela? What's your view on that?
I think Secretary Rubio has turned this into a crusade that he and his supporters want to conduct. I don't see any reason for it. I think it's a very dumb idea. You really want to stop the drug problem, you've got to begin here at home.
Well,
First,
okay, I live on the border, so I'm here right here in El Paso, and I witnessed the Ciudad Juarez killings, the wars that happened here. It's bad, but right now it's the safest it's ever been. The military is all up and down this border. From what I see, my friends in the border patrol tell me, dude, this is like the best I've ever seen it. It's almost completely stopped. It's almost at zero. But I mean, they're still
problem,
finding other ways. They're coming through
oh yeah.
Canada.
Well, the problem is not with the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol has always been, in my judgment, underfunded and underpaid.
Well, I mean,
And
the military is here now. Now it's all military zoned. I can't even
well,
get near there
it
now.
should have stayed military. You know, that's where General Pershing, as a one-star, commanded the entire Mexican border in 1917. We should never have given that up. The military should have always been there. It was there since 1846 because Mexico has always had problems internally. That place has been in some form of revolutionary upheaval almost from the time the Spaniards left.
Right. I mean, well, the cartels run Mexico, man. I
Well,
mean,
they do. They do. You're absolutely right. And by the way, that's far more serious than anything happening in Venezuela. But my point to you is it's not enough to guard the borders. First of all, the legal points of entry are a big problem because the cartels can pay every customs officer on the legal points of entry 30,000 bucks a month on
I
top
used
of
to pay him a couple hundred to cross stuff over.
you
I mean,
got
back
off
when I was a
cheap.
kid, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
well, you got off cheap. You got
Yeah, I
off cheap.
did. I
It's
could
a
film
lot
in
more
lane
expensive.
6.
Well, not we're seeing not only drugs and people being trafficked through these legal ports of entry, we're also seeing trucks
Yeah.
with full of cash. You're
Yeah.
talking
Oh, yeah.
millions of dollars moving from north to south. And again, you've got people there at the legal ports of entry say, come on through, come on through,
Yeah.
because they've been paid to let them through. my point is this. First of all, I would take over all those legal points of entry with the military. And I would take them over on a rotational basis, rotate battalions in every 30, 45 days, whatever is necessary. We've done that before. We did that on the Czechoslovak and East German borders. I did that as a young officer. And we did it along the Euphrates River after in 1991 and controlled that border. The military knows how to do it, and our technology today is brilliant. It's so much better than anything we had 30 years ago. It's not even funny. Now, having said that, though, where's the problem? The problem with drug use and distribution is here at home.
Yeah.
Now, Lee Kuan Yew was the president of Singapore. He built Singapore after World War II, literally himself. And they had a terrible drug problem. And so he established a law. If you come into Singapore and try to distribute drugs, you will be executed.
Right. Yeah.
You know what? It went away.
It went away quick.
You're damn right. And people say, well, are you going to execute users? I said, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to get the people that are selling the drugs. If you come into this country and you try to sell drugs, I don't care if you're an American citizen or a foreigner, we should execute you.
I agree with that. To be quite honest with you, I agree with that method. That'll stop it immediately.
Exactly.
Even the guy down the street that's selling bags of whatever, the small time dealer, they'll be scared. This will stop immediately.
Right. You don't need to execute that many people to make your
So
point.
no, no, just one publicly. But so, what's your thoughts on Trump now deploying the National Guard into what 19 states? It looks like he's going to go into Chicago. They're expecting a lot of civil unrest, even like a minor. I don't imagine this going to be much of a civil war, but let's say civil unrest. What's your thoughts on this? Is he going about it the right way to clean up our streets and take these drug dealers, this crime off the streets, of violent crime at least? And do you feel like he's getting ready for something bigger, like arrests? Do you think that that's why he's putting his chess pieces in order to get ready for? Because if they protested and rioted for George, I think they're going to do.
Well, in 2003, I was still in active duty and I was following the news about the deployment of our forces to Iraq, or actually at that point to Kuwait, to move into Iraq eventually. And in the Washington Post, there was an interesting article, an interview with people in Washington. And the interview that really, really had an impact on me was with an elderly black woman. She was probably in her late 60s, maybe 70. And she said, well, I know that we're sending forces to fight in Iraq, but I wish the army would come and occupy my neighborhood and get rid of all the drug dealers, pimps, and criminals that threaten all of us. Now, that was 2003. If you talk to the people living in the neighborhoods right now, I think you'll find that most of them would welcome the U.S. military in that area to clean it up.
Yeah,
Now, do they want it permanently? No.
they got to leave.
And does the American military want to do this permanently? No. But there is a requirement because if you look at the criminality that has risen in these cities over the last 30 years, and remember that a lot of it is not reported accurately anymore. That's the other problem with the government. It doesn't always report the statistics honestly of who's killing whom and why. But if you go in there, you're going to have an impact. Now, will that be permanent? Well, that depends on how you work with the police, because the liaison between the police and the military has to be very good. And the police have to lead the effort. The military can back them up and can intervene where required, but the police need to be in charge. Now, if you've got corrupt police, you got to get rid of them. If you have police that don't want to support the government, you got to get rid of them. The point is to enforce the law
Right.
and get the criminals apprehended and dealt with quickly. That's the other problem of the courts. We have too many people in the court system, appointees over the last 30 years under the left, that are anxious to release all these people at their earliest.
Lawfare, and they're using lawfare to do so. The tactics that they're used.
So you could set up panels of justices appointed by the president. In other words, judges that are appointed for the express purpose of supporting the effort to clean up Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, Los Angeles, New Orleans, St. Louis, San Francisco. These are just some of them.
So
I think what Trump wants to do is good. What I don't see any evidence for, once again, is the strategy.
Correct. Okay, so just for a second, I've always said on my channel, the pendulum swings far left, it's going to swing far right. The cure's got to be greater than the disease. But what do
Yes.
you have to say, like, to the left or the people out there screaming that he's bringing in a police state? I guess the globalists are getting what they want anyway. They're getting the police state, right? So the military's coming on the streets. So what do you say to people like that? I mean, they got to leave after a certain amount of time, but are they going to, uh, you know, impose this AI surveillance? I mean, we're already being watched anyway, but once the military comes in and takes over all the cities, the democratic hellholes, let's say, um, are they going to leave? Is that, I mean, how long do you expect the military to stay there to effectively clean up the streets? And are they going to leave this AI footprint there that's going to be surveilling the whole city? I mean, is that where we're headed in this?
Well, the surveillance footprint is a matter for decision by the law. In other words, you're exploring this area of privacy. We want our privacy as Americans. That's essential to our freedom. That's something I can't answer. In other words, that has to be adjudicated. Someone has to sit down, legal authorities as well as people who understand the technology and sort through that. What I will say is that the military should have very carefully framed, described objectives. You're going into this city. Within the city, you're going into these areas. What are your objectives in each area? Who are the police who are going with you, who know the area and are going to advise you, bring you in, and use you when necessary? Because once again, I don't think we have to spearhead everything with military power. There are going to be hard cases where the military is absolutely needed. But the police that live there, work there, serve there, ought to be in the lead. And there should be an end state. When we've reached this point and crime is at this level, that's when we begin withdrawing. That should not, if we do our jobs properly, we know what we're doing. That shouldn't take longer than 120 days,
Have
maybe
you
180 days. That's no more than 6 months.
Have you heard of these SUVs pulling up and dragging the homeless people off the streets and nobody knows where they're going? I mean, this is a huge problem right now. I've been watching a lot of this on YouTube, and it
Mhm.
only started happening under this administration. And I'm wondering, I mean, obviously, we don't want degenerate behavior. We don't want people shooting up and defecating all over the streets. I'm all for that, but there's a lot of videos coming out right now that I've been watching that the homeless people are disappearing in places like Houston, Austin, and they've been doing a lot of reporting on this and asking other homeless people, and they're saying we're scared. We don't know what's going on. They're dragging people out. They're coming in these SUVs and just taking them off the streets. What do you think's going on there? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, the first person to deal with this problem, believe it or not, was Gavin Newsom. And that's when President Xi from China came to San Francisco for a conference. And he suddenly made the decision to clean up San Francisco. And thousands of homeless drug users who were doing all the things that you described disappeared.
But
They
where
were
do
taken
they go?
to Kirks. Well, I don't know where they went, but I know that they didn't all die
So,
because large numbers of them came back again after Xi left. Now, I think what you have to do is understand that large numbers of these people are mentally ill
right.
and they have to go into some sort of treatment center. You have to set something up. You can't release them on their own recognizance because if you do, they'll go back and repeat the behavior they were,
Right, and
doing.
nobody wants to step over needles and feces and tents. Nobody wants that, and I agree with that. But where are they going is the question. I mean, are they going
Well,
to encampments?
all I can tell you is that Gavin Newsom did this in at least for a temporary period because of Xi's visit from China. I think that first of all, I see no evidence that anybody's being executed. That's a lot of nonsense.
Okay.
Where are they going temporarily for treatment? Who's viewing them? Who's interviewing them? I don't know. I'm told that they are apprehending people and then interviewing. In other words, they're separating what you're describing as homeless from people who are actually illegally here in the United States. That's going on. ICE is contrary to popular belief, and I know Tom Homan He is a decent, honorable man. I don't think he has any real authority, sadly. Doesn't have much money, but everybody respects him and knows him. And I'm absolutely confident that he would never engage in that kind of behavior. And I don't see any evidence from what I've seen in Washington with the National Guard of any, Gestapo tactics or brutality. In other words, we all have to step back from all the abuse that is hurled in the direction of the government, of the Trump administration, of the president. A lot of that is just nonsense designed to discredit everything and anything he says. I mean, you started earlier, you mentioned Antifa. We never talked about that. But Antifa did a couple of $1 billion worth of damage across the country. I've forgotten the exact number of people that there were a lot of people seriously injured, and we didn't do much about it.
Right. Right.
And then we went to this thing in January, which was never what it was billed as in the media,
Right.
as sort of dangerous insurrection. And I was actually dragged in and they asked me questions in connection with it, even though I was at the Pentagon on that day. And I said, well, my definition of an insurrection is when you have a few thousand men with guns who show up and shoot their way in. I said, I didn't see any guns. The only people that I saw with guns were policemen.
Right. And they were being let in by them.
Yeah. So everybody has to exercise a certain amount of judgment when they hear a lot of these allegations and test, for the truth. I don't think we're getting a lot of truth. I think we're hearing from senators like Dick Durbin, who's a very prominent Democrat who utterly hates and despises the Trump administration and is going to try and discredit anything it does. And he's not the only one. There are many others. I think Schumer is similar. The point is you've got to step back from this and see what's real and what isn't. And I saw it on the other side. I saw a lot of things said about his administration that weren't true. And nobody in Washington is neutral. Everybody is on a side.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but we're Americans. We're supposed to listen to this stuff and ask ourselves a question. Does it pass the smell test? So most of it doesn't.
So before I let you go, I want to get a grade from you on Trump. Thus far in his presidency, what kind of grade do you give him thus far?
Well, it depends on what you look at in terms of foreign relations.
Altogether, like if you give
Well,
separate grades if you like, but
I think he has blown it in foreign policy, foreign relations. We should have simply walked away from this Ukraine thing, told the Europeans to stop the nonsense, get our troops out. He should have come in with a plan for the whole border to militarize it quickly. Remember, the president is most powerful in the first 90 days of his administration. And he could have done wonderful things here at home on the border immediately, and it took far too long for him to take action. The same thing is true for the criminality. Let me say one other thing. Franklin Roosevelt had something that he called the fireside chat. I think there were only 5 or 6 fireside chats. But he would come over the radio and he would spend 15, 20 minutes explaining to the American people why he was doing what he was doing. One of them was extending lend-lease to the British. We were not at war. It's 1940. And he said, what do you do if your neighbor's house is on fire? Well, if he needs a hose and water, you lend him a hose so that he can put the fire out. That's what I'm doing. Suddenly, all the opposition to helping Great Britain went away because it was explained in a way that Americans could understand. I think President Trump needs to have a similar approach. He needs to have a strategy with a goal, and he needs to explain that to the American people. That's not what we're getting. What we're getting is impulse. I decided we're going to go into Washington. I decided on Chicago. Oh no, we're going to Memphis now.
right,
And listen, I have no objections to going to Memphis. That's a hellhole for
right,
criminality,
right.
murder.
All these Democratic hellholes need.
Yeah, and so I understand that, but there has to be a strategic approach. It has to be coherent. And when you do that, you immunize yourself against a lot of the attacks that he's getting right now from people on the Hill and the media.
So no grade?
I think in foreign policy, defense policy, I think we're at an F.
An F.
I think here at home, I give him a C plus.
All right, so he's failing. He's about
Well,
a D minus.
the other thing is this economy. I mean, he knows, I know he knows that we cannot sustain this national sovereign debt.
Right.
Impossible. Every 110 days, we add another $1 trillion to it. It's crazy. We're spending more to service the debt with debt payments than we are spending on national defense. This is not sustainable. He's got to grab that, and he's got to come up with more than smoke and mirrors to deal with it. He's got to admit that this is going to be painful. But he's 79. The probability that he will run again is not high.
Right.
If anybody is in a position to administer pain pills for the right reasons, he's the man. But he's not doing it.
Got you.
And I would get out of the war business. Forget this crap of invading Venezuela. That's ridiculous. Let's focus on what we talked about: your borders, your airspace, your airports, your ports of entry, your harbors, and let's go after the dealers, the networks in our country. That's where you're going
Impose
to,
strict laws
and you've got to enforce them.
and enforce them. Right. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Where do people find you? Do you want them to find you?
Maybe on the internet, but that's it. Yeah, I live somewhere in the
Well, I mean,
distant
do you
Blue
have
Ridge
social media
Mountains.
handles or anything that you want to put out there?
I'm on X. You Google my name, you're going to
Okay.
find all sorts of stuff, good and bad.
All right.
And I'm on YouTube, and I there is an event coming up on the 4th of October in Dallas, Texas, and we were going to hold a large gathering of 400 or 500 people, but in view of Charlie's assassination, a lot of people expressed concern about security.
Safety.
So now it's a VIP dinner,
Okay.
not inexpensive, but it's going to have a VIP reception and a VIP dinner in Dallas, Texas on the 4th of October. It'll run from basically 5 or 6 until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I think we'll have a limit of maybe 60 people, 50 people, something like that. I encourage anybody who wants to talk about these tough issues to come.
Right.
Judge Napolitano will be there. He'll cover the legal waterfront. Natalie Brunell, very bright financial analyst, very high on crypto. She will be there to talk about the realities of our financial situation, and I'll be there trying to
Fair enough.
stay out of sight and a low profile
In the
target.
corner somewhere. Oh, all right, Douglas. Thank you for joining me. Stay with me just for 1 second.
Okay.